Morning, everyone. Good morning. Once again, if we can take our seats, we're going to begin what I think will be remembered as a tremendous program today. I'm Denny Sonyer. I'm President and CEO of the Canton Regional Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of our board and all of our 1,800 members, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. But also special thanks to our sponsors and our dignitaries and our special guests. The Stark Forum, let me give you a little bit of background on the Stark Forum. The Stark Forum is an event that we hold on occasion. And the reason I say that is that we do not set an agenda too far in advance because we want the forum to be timely. We want the forum to discuss issues that are dominating our community. And so as we look at the community and we talk to many of our members, our community leaders, our board of directors, we determine what is the topic of the day that we want to make sure that we can focus on. And I think obviously mental illness, healthy mental practices, and how it affects our community, in all communities really, on a daily basis is something that we need to take time and reflect and discuss. You know, one of the specifics for today, the Chamber being a business organization, is taking that theme and applying it to the workplace. We just came through COVID, still lingering with some of the COVID issues. We're dealing with an economy, we're dealing with a crisis in the Ukraine. And all this, with many other things that we deal with every day in our lives, have some type of a effect on us. We talk about workforce, we talk about the workplace, we talk about retaining and attracting talent and how important that is. But do we think about how important the mental health of that talent is? And I think as we go through today with some industry experts and a real life story from our special guest, Bernie Kosar, we're going to learn how maybe we should pay more closer attention to that and how these issues can affect not only us personally, but our families and certainly in the workplace. So today I want to say thank you to AltCare. For being our presenting sponsor. AltCare has been a presenting sponsor of the Stark Forum for several years. We're very thankful for that. We have a few other sponsors today also I want to recognize. We have Akron Children's Hospital with us, Employers Health, and also Robert Fay, CPA. And so thank you to this individual and these organizations. And let's give them a round of applause, please. We have some elected officials that are with us today. I want to say thank you for what you do every day. Obviously, what you do in the community is extremely important. And you being here today is extremely meaningful to all of us in the room. I'm going to ask them to stand and remain standing, and then we'll acknowledge them at the end, please. Pete Ferguson, Canton City Council. Dr. Ferguson, welcome. Stephanie Warren, North Canton City Council. Todd Hawk, Jackson Township Trustee. Richard Regulus, Stark County Commissioner. And John Orr, North Canton Council. And although she is not an elected official, I want to welcome Debbie Busby, who is the president of the Massillon West Stark Chamber of Commerce. Please give them all a round of applause. The Chamber and all of you, we couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without our sponsors, but we really could not do this without a great staff and the team who has worked diligently to put this on today. And it begins with our events department, runs through our marketing. And I especially just want to say thank you to Colin Floyd, our VP of Events, and Kelly Pirro, our Director of Marketing and Communications. If they would stand, please. Kelly, stand up. And the rest of the chamber staff, if you would stand and be recognized for all that you do throughout the year, and certainly today. But, you know, vital to any organization is its board of directors, and the chamber has an outstanding board of directors. And I'm going to ask them to stand and remain standing until all have been introduced. We have from the president of the Akron-Canton Airport, Ren Camacho. From AltCare, Mike Galena. From Altman Health Foundation and our treasurer of the chamber, Mark Wright. Executive committee member and chamber board member, Chris Goff. We have Todd Hawk, who's an executive committee board member, Todd. And we have Mark Vandergriff with Innis Majority. And we have Kenny Peterson with everyone's favorite, Nothing But Kinks. And by the way, afterwards we're having a little flag football contest. I get the first 3 picks in today's draft, and I take Bernie, Kenny, and Kenny's cousin Sean. Where's Sean? Who I understand played for Michigan and the Patriots. Stand up. So Rick Haynes, president of Altman Health Foundation. By the way, the board members can sit back down. President of Altman Health Foundation and Vicki, his dear wife, are with us. I want to say congratulations to Rick. Many of us have known Rick over a number of years as the president and CEO of AltCare. And upon Ed Roth's retirement, and I will say this unequivocally, Altman Health Foundation made a great decision in hiring in-house part of their team that knows this community as well as anyone, and that's Rick Haynes. And so, Rick, thank you so much. I told Bernie earlier, his affiliation with AltCare, he could not be affiliated with a better brand than AltCare and Altman Health Foundation in this community. So Rick, thank you. Vicki, thank you for all that the two of you do in our community. And thanks for being with us. I also want to thank, we have some very special mental health providers with us today. And I encourage you, if you've not done this already, after the meeting, go back into the back of the room and say hello to them. And pick up some literature, ask a question, see how you can maybe bring their programs more into focus in your business, in your daily lives. So I want to thank ComQuest, Coleman Professional Services, Child and Adolescent Behavioral Health, and Stark Marr for being with us. And thank you for what you do every day in the community. We have a great program today. I really want to thank Dr. Andrew. Dr. Andrew will be moderating the event today. We have two wonderful panelists that will be able to enlighten us on many things. But you know, over the past couple of weeks, we had several conference calls. And I just want to say thank you so much for your patience, your input, your understanding, your professionalism, and what you bring forth and what you'll bring forth today. And say thank you also in advance to our professionals that will be part of our panel. Before I introduce Mike Galena, I was told this morning I have a very, very important announcement to make. So I hope you're all ready and paying attention, because this was the most important thing they told me I had to do today. There are cookies and coffee in the back of the room. So I can cross that off of my list, and now we can get to the real meat of things. You know, someone who's not a stranger to anyone in this room, and I consider a dear friend, is Mike Galena. And Mike has been certainly part of the planning of this. And when we first, as a team at the Chamber, talked to Mike about today, if you know Mike, his wheels started turning. And I just want to say thank you to him for his ideas, his ability to reach out to our special guest, and his association, not just with the business community, but with the healthcare community through his position with AltCare. He brings real-time, real-life, connection to us every day. And Mike's going to introduce our special guest, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot, but I just want to say this. I had a chance to sit down with Bernie a little bit ago, and we reminisced a little bit. I went to school in Cleveland, and I started school in the 70s, and as some very, very, very exciting time with the Browns. And Bernie was certainly our hero. And I just want to say thank you for the, for the commitment that Cleveland and Northeast Ohio you had. I know you went to school in Miami, but coming back and energizing.
Ohio State could recruit me.
Kenny. And just really, I say this very sincerely, just he was a name that we all looked up to and brought a lot of pride. And back in the 70s, if you remember Cleveland, there was not a lot of pride. So through football, through athletics, through excellence, through his Northeast Ohio connections, I know he was all of our heroes. So thanks for being with us today, Bernie. With that, I'm going to ask Mike Galena to come up.
You got to handle Bernie. Well, you're 5'6". I'm Brian Brennan in Bernie's offense. I'm Brian Brennan. So right away, I'm going to be the complimentary guy right out of the gate. So Bernie will definitely be the quarterback. I'll be the complimentary receiver. But as we have this conversation in our little huddle, it's going to be really cool for each of us to journey with Bernie, and that's not something I practiced. Showed up. Journey with Bernie, to talk a little bit about as he came through his life from Boardman to the U and then back through the league, the challenges that mental health but also physical health will do together. As a player, there's a level of expectation. And in a professional world, it's your livelihood. But then injury creeps in, and it has a way of colliding with you to say, can I do this and for how long? And how's my mental weight managing through that? So we're going to take a journey with Bernie in that, I would say, pieces together of his career to connect that story. So right away, I want to let you know that's how that's going to roll. Then after that, we'll transition into our panel. Dr. Wimslow, Ruth, and Dr. Mader, we're going to talk to you about, let's connect the real life to your work worlds, your family worlds, the kids that you lead, the grandparents that you are, and talk about why this is important and what you can do about it. The stigma piece is now on the sideline. That has to be play call number one, that we move stigma to the sideline. And we get in this game. Mental health is the same as your physical health. And we should be attacking it with the same type of resources that they've had in careers. We need to do it in our careers as well. So I set the tone for you to listen that way, and your call to action will be, what do you do about that in the worlds that you live in? So Bernie and I will chat, then we're going to turn it over to the panel, continue to eat, work your way through that, and then we'll wrap it up at the end with Denny and me. So when you introduce a fellow like Bernie, who probably doesn't need introduction, what I typically will do is say, listen to the journey and then where you connect to it. We know Bernie as a football player, but let's connect to his journey where you may remember or recall him. So let's start back to Boardman High School. Right away, that's a new fact for some. National Honor Society student at Boardman High School, by the way. Awesome student athlete, so establish that right away. And a good baseball pitcher. Rick, you need to talk to him about that, the two of you. Rick at Kent State, Bernie at Boardman High School, but a good baseball pitcher. But then the University of Miami, or he may do this, the U. He does this for You Matter for us now too. So I always have fun with both whenever I see that. It's the you. And he started all 12 games as a freshman in 1983. So think about that. Right out of high school, the mental weight, being a freshman and starting at the U. National championship in the Orange Bowl, the first in school history. MVP of the game. 1984, he was 4th in the Heisman voting. 85, he graduates early. Listen to this. Graduates early with a double major in finance and economics. And he has 2 years left of school. Understand the power of the person. Certainly we know him as a quarterback, but his education background is so powerfully cool, and I wanted to establish that right away. At the time, those 2 years of eligibility became a conversation point because the professional level, he wanted to play for the Cleveland Browns. Listen to the word, wanted to play for the Cleveland Browns. Then he alluded to it, but he wanted to be here. And guess what? He manipulated the system in the best way to get here. There were rules written after Bernie found his way to Cleveland based on how the draft was managed. And we could go into a whole chapter. Joe Horrigan could write a book on that, for sure. Played with the Browns from 85 to 93. The Cowboys in 1993. He was a Super Bowl champion, by the way, with the Dallas Cowboys. And finished his career with the Miami Dolphins, 94, 95, and 96. So a wonderful journey. 2-time Pro Bowler. And listen to a couple of statistics before I bring Bernie up here. 1986 playoff record, 489 yards against the Jets. So you say, okay, Mike, that's a cool number, but listen to this. That was a playoff record until Tom Brady broke it in Super Bowl 52. That's how long that lasted. Powerful, Bernie. And then 1990 and 91, he had the league record of 308 passes without an interception. Think of that in the NFL. Bouncing balls, hit while you're throwing, slipping and falling. He nailed it, 308 in a row. It stood for almost 2 decades. And again, Tom Brady broke it in 2010. So Bernie's connected to Tom in the best way. Bernie, it's, you know, somebody has to set a record for somebody to get to him. Trailblazer. How about you?
I like that I'm in the same category.
I'm going to keep you there. I'm going to keep you there. Cleveland Brown Legends in 2001, the inaugural class. Radio and TV work for the Browns and ESPN. That's probably where you catch up with him a lot now in that journey. He has 4 adult children. Sarah, Joe, Rachel, and Rebecca. So the father around mental health and development with children. So concept of leadership, health, and certainly wellness. We're going to spend time with Bernie today. And here's what I want to share before you bring him up. Bernie, I was at the Cavs-Hawks play-in game up at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. They cut away to you. The place, 20,000 people erupt. It was crazy. It was better ovation than the game got. It was perfect. So, Bernie, I'm going to share this. We may not be able to do 20,000 loud, but we'll do 20,000 strong. Let's welcome Bernie Kosar. PK, I'll get you set up. There you go, big guy.
Thank you.
He has to sit down so I can give him a hug.
Uh-huh.
It's perfect. I'm the ball boy.
I'm not as technically savvy as Mr. Galena here, so I needed the handheld.
That's always a range of perspective, Bernie. Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do, just a free conversation. I want you to sit back and relax. You heard a little bit about him, but now let's connect you to his story through some questioning that will be developed as he came along through that journey. So let's go back to Boardman High School, Bernie, and certainly your career is moving along to a cool spot. Who did you lean on for support while you started to say, hey, I could be pretty good at this game of football, and folks are going to start a feeding frenzy toward me? How'd you manage all that expectation?
Well, first, it's an honor to be here today. Rick, thanks for everything you're doing with Altman and Alt Care to have me here. Here at the Hall of Fame, here with some of our favorite NFL people. I'm honored and humbled to actually be sitting here as a 58-year-old guy and to actually remember my high school days. After 40-some surgeries, 80-some broken bones, 100 concussions, the ability just to sit here, remember, and articulate, enunciate, communicate with you is a heck of a blessing. So thank you.
That's for sure. Hey. For sure.
You know, we were joking about going to University of Miami, and not going to Ohio State. And Mike was so cool at talking about Northeastern Ohio and me wanting to be back here in Cleveland and play for the Browns. But really, growing up in Youngstown in the 70s, being really a mommy's boy, this is the area I always wanted to be at. And when you see the effect that you're able to have and the gifts that you've been able to be given, and almost a responsibility to be able to give back to it, some of the subjects that even here we're talking about today, physical health, mental health, equally as important. Those are tough subjects to address. Fortunately, in the year 2022, it's becoming a little more easier to have these conversations. Heck, when in the 70s, 80s, I'm not even sure we knew these existed. Heck, is back at just 5 to 10 years ago, I'm not sure people felt comfortable talking about these type issues. So being able to be around socially conscious people that are really dedicated to improving the lives of people, of families, of communities, it's really something that I'm proud to be associated with.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. That's awesome right out of the gate. And you hear Bernie talking about the generation of acceptance of this, where before, let's just use that development back from Boardman to the U, if folks were struggling with mental health issues or just depression or anxiety, it was almost like that had to stay on the sideline. You couldn't talk about that.
Yeah, and this area here, and not to make this a sexist statement, but from Northeastern Ohio, you know, a lot of the male, female, and type stuff, I call it the old school prehistoric way of thinking. As men, you didn't want to show your weakness. You didn't want to pretend that you didn't have the answers. You didn't want to be uncomfortable. You didn't want to be able to say, hey, I don't know this answer. My head hurts. I don't know why I have anxiety. I don't know why I'm melting down. I don't know why I have thoughts in my head that really you don't want to get to your mouth or that are causing extreme actions from you. And that almost self-isolation that I think it brings with a lot of people, where they think they're the only ones dealing with it. And as men, you sometimes feel like you don't have that ability to bring that out. If you talk about it, it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're not strong, that you're not capable, that you're going to fail. And I actually really would challenge anybody in here to know that that's absolutely not the case. That there are, just about all of us in here and have some type of insecurities, some type of things that within our confidence and with our self-esteem that we could use to feel better. And we're some of the leaders. I look at some of the great companies and some of the great people that are here today, here from Northeastern Ohio, here in Stark County, and we're some of the best leaders in our area. And we know that sometimes we aren't on top of our game, that we feel uncomfortable with admitting some of our frailties or some of our weaknesses. And we're the leaders of our area. So if we sometimes have these thoughts and we have these feelings and they're hard to express, so so many other people have these feelings in your family, your employers, because we're having them, and people look up to us like we have it great. And deep down, when we're at our house late at night, we know that sometimes we have these insecurities, these anxious moments, these alone feelings that we are trying to deal with. So when you have physical ailments and mental ailments, they really work hand in hand together. And when you're able to have real people, real friends, real family, and a real environment that makes it okay to make some of the statements that I've just made over the last couple minutes, some of the things that we're talking about, where you're not getting chastised from Kenny, where we're not getting crucified in the locker room for saying something like this, where you're not embarrassed or afraid to be belittled because you have to make light of your situation because you don't know how to cope with it, know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Here, Bernie using cool phrases, coping, right away. What are coping mechanisms that each use? And then he takes you through that idea of expectation, particularly in the male side. We're supposed to have it all together. We're the leader. We're the quarterback of all those families, those workplaces, those boardrooms. When in effect, those...
Well, okay, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go.
With my daughters here, though, and that is the way we were raised, to think like
Right.
that. Now, as a Mr. Mom, having 3 beautiful daughters, that's really not really the mindset, though.
Take us there a little bit. I like-
Women have as much of an opportunity to do any of this stuff, to be leaders of the family, to be leaders of the community, to be leaders of the business. Unfortunately, for the way we were raised back in the 70s, that sometimes wasn't enhanced and talked about. But these same type issues and these same type of responsibilities moving forward, I believe, going into the future past 2022, women, like men, should be raised to have these expectations of being leaders, of being of having that ability to reach for what they want. Sometimes in the 70s, 80s, we were guilty in our area here of maybe suppressing some of that.
I love Bernie took you to his children, particularly the 4 girls. Let's talk about that a little bit. How do you manage those girls in this 2022 range now as a dad?
Well, I was joking with there's a high school girl here today that has won a beauty pageant, okay? And,
Yeah. Buckeye
and like
State.
my
Buckeye
daughters,
State back
okay, Miss Buckeye State, and when my daughters were 14, 15, 16, 17, they looked significantly older than that. And I was not ready at 14, 15, 16 for the pursuit of college-age men coming to my house. So I was, some of the stories that you did read about me, I scraped most of them off of the internet. Most of those are embellished, except the ones with my daughters are factual. That was a Kid Rock guitar over that young man's head.
Bernie, I remember you sharing that. He said,
Yeah.
my daughter is on scholarship.
I really mean,
He's
when I
not.
say don't touch, I mean don't touch.
It was perfect. Yep, she was on scholarship and he was not. So he was the one leaving.
Yeah, and it's funny the way guys will actually assume that as the father, you want to be their friend. Okay? It's a very easy statement. Until you dupe my daughter to say, I do, we are not friends.
There's good mental health in that duping stage too here. I call it an acquisition of love.
Yeah, so all of my pathways towards really loving and giving back and open-mindedness, that somewhat goes out the door when you talk about the boyfriend issue.
Bernie, as you manage that whole piece though, as you think about children talking to you, and many folks here in the audience have children or friends of children, and that concept of mental health, if someone approaches them, is there a certain approach you would use to say, hey, here might be some things to think about? Or think about in a conversation, what might be appropriate to guide them back to?
Yeah, you know, Mike, that's a good way of saying this, and I'm very fascinated and fixated on, as all of us say we are, on the development of kids and the development of our youth. And I'm not picking on us as adults, but again, and I'm not trying to have massive truth serum here, but really as a 58-year-old guy, and there's people here younger and older than me here today, but we're putting on a lot of times a perception of perfection, that I'm completely happy, I'm completely healthy, everything's completely great in my life. It's absolutely not the case, probably with most all of us here. But when we talk to kids, a lot of times we're trying to give that perception that we're perfect, we're great, that what we're saying is absolutely right. And what I've found is a lot of people our age actually aren't right and actually don't give good advice. And it was really disappointing to become an older person and realize that people our age aren't wise and don't give good advice. And I'm not picking on people, but that's really factual. You guys know that. You don't want advice from every person you talk to. But when I was a kid, I was taught respect your elders, look up to your elders, and all your elders, all your teachers are right. Well, all of us adults were not right. And I would say to us, when you're talking to kids, you know, sometimes they ask great questions that you don't know the answer to. Let's not BS them like we're always right, you know, like we browbeat them, like you need to just listen to me. because I'm the adult, because I know, because I've been there. Because I'm really finding that, yeah, I'm the adult, I know, I've been there. Those are true for all of us here, but doesn't mean we don't know the third point to that of what's the right thing to do after that. So I've been really working in some of the inner cities lately, and yes, and I'm finding this for sure in the little leagues too, which I love doing in the schools, I'm there talking to kids, and I'm working with the kids at these practices. But really what you're doing is you're talking to their parents there, and the parents need coached up. Like I needed coached up. I'm the person you were that I'm talking about right here. When I was 35, 40, 45, and my kids are 5, 10, 12, 14 years old, I thought I knew everything, or I was bluffing like I knew everything, trying to, and sometimes, my intentions were right. I thought that's what society said we were supposed to be. That's what a man is. That's what a leader is. He knows everything. He always knows the answers. Making sure you know what the right answers are and delivering the answers the right way. Self-confidence and self-esteem is so important, even for us as older people, for sure, as younger kids. Developing a positiveness with them from a confidence standpoint, from a self-esteem standpoint, as opposed to talking down at them, talking more with them.
Good point, as you share, Bernie, that talk about walking with them. Self-esteem, still with consequences, still with responsibilities. That's the reality, or call the truth. But you walk through that with them, providing those guardrails, so to speak.
I like how you said consequences. You absolutely have to figure out how a consequence works with certain things. In the older days, our football days, there was a little more graphic and more prehistoric in what you did. And we saw a lot of guys who did not come through that very well, and it hurt their lives. I'm actually proud that abuse happened to us. Our coaches probably would be put in jail for some of the things they did, but it worked on me. It toughened me up. Unfortunately, I did see some cost for some other people, but I'm proud and I'm glad that I got that type of tough, strict love at that point. I'd be curious, maybe listening today, in society now, it's a little tougher to do the tough love from the way we were groomed for it, and I'm still kind of searching for ways to have, get results with types of consequences that are different as we get into these evolving, changing times.
Bernie, let's switch gears a little bit as we think about children. We're going to shift gears now to you and use the concept of support network, or support from the locker room to family to your trip to the U and back. You left home, and so you had to have support groups or people, if you will, in your life that help steer that. Talk about the importance of it, and maybe even a couple people that were really helpful to you.
Yeah, you'd asked me early as I digressed at the beginning of high school, and of course your parents, growing up here, have an enormous attitude and outcome on how I look and how you end up. So my mom and dad were amazing. Some of my high school coaches were. We were blessed, and I look at and I keep referring to Kenny and Sean over here, but I say we were blessed being in the locker room, and we came out the right side of it. And that support groups that we had in high school and college, early in the pros, really gives you a family and a culture and a support group. From a friendship standpoint, from a personality standpoint, and then from the medical standpoint, you have probably the best care going to get you to play, though. Maybe not necessarily get you to sit on this stage right now at 58 years old, because some of the people in here have heard this. If you'd asked me to do this 5 years ago, I would have been sitting up here. My left shoulder would have started here, and my right shoulder would have ended up on Mike's right thing. I was quite a few ho-hos north of 300 pounds. And the inability, about 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with 5 years left of cognitive brain function. I wasn't able to say cognitive. I could not articulate, enunciate, communicate any multiple syllable words. The inability to again, articulate these words, you wouldn't have been able to understand me. God only knows what would have come out of my mouth. But that feeling of really helplessness, I had started having seizures. So there was something around plane flights that caused the altitude. And coming out of that 4 years ago with a real concerted effort to figure out, and no disrespect to some of the medical doctors that I had back when I was playing, but they were short-term oriented to play. So the rehabs, the pain medications, the different types of pills, almost like technology of the phones and iPads we have. 30 years ago, they weren't as good. Technology is getting better, and understanding is getting better. So I'm not blaming. I'm not one of those that's looking to blame from 30, 40 years ago. But we got to learn from our mistakes, from what was happening back then. And that's kind of where today with Altman and Alt Care and this, talking about your physical wellness and how it fits into your mental wellness. They're absolutely tied together, the physical component with the mental component. And I'm such a believer in food is your medicine. So how we're eating today is close to how I've evolved eating. And as an inbred Slovak who grew up on kibasi and pierogi for breakfast, you see why with the kolaches that I was north of 3 bills. Okay, so now juicing is Vitamix is we should have them up as one of our sponsors.
Yeah, that's right.
The Vitamix things. So doing things like that, it's almost a responsibility to start talking about it, because in the locker room back 20, 30, 40 years ago, and these aren't the things you talked about. In the family dinners, going out with the guys, you were yelled at if you ate your vegetables. You were yelled at if you drank water. If you did not have a shot of whiskey, you were bad word, bad word, bad word. Yeah. That type of mindset, that type of toughness, that type of fake toughness, I should say, is a kind of a mindset that, and a conversation piece that I really think needs to happen more than less right now.
You listen to Bernie talk about how he had to make a change, and he went right to the physical health, the diet, the taking care of yourself. So being over 300 and looking like you could play tomorrow, that ability to come along that way. How'd you get started, Bernie? What was the thing that said, I got to switch this? I need to flip a switch somehow. If you can tell us.
It was really clear. I don't want to say it to sound morbid, but I came out of my 14th seizure. I was in a coma 4 days. It was the 96th hour, and I came out of it, and the doctor came in and said, man, you're awesome, how tough you are, and you made it, and keep up with your medicine, keep up with your protocols, and I'll see you in a month. And I'm like, bro, you're killing me. And that was 4.5 years ago, so I started real excessively right then, and not going back. I didn't go to the doc for like 3 years. And I started this whole holistic program of juicing, IV therapy, and a complete reduction of medications. So I'm not high on pharma's list right now. So he don't. And thank you. And when I was in the system, with 4 or 5 high blood pressure pills and all the other scripts, the cholesterol pills, the anti-inflammation pills, the pain medication, the Oxycontins, the Adderalls, the sleeping things, and you're still in pain and you're not sleeping, how do you get around, how do you get off of that, how do you get away from that? And I still remember my internal doctor saying, hey, my blood pressure is 160 over 110. And I was on these 4 or 5 pills of high blood pressure. So despite what my coaches said when they cut me, I am coachable. I do listen, okay? And I was, unfortunately, to listen to the wrong docs there. So, to have those type numbers, and then to really have a situation like myself, and I've had quite a few players my age, some of my teammates having similar things. So I took the dive at trying to figure this out first myself. I made it. So now I've taken probably a good 50 or 60 of my friends kind of through this program to live a life, you know, to be able to be responsible, to be able to be happy, to spread the word of the ability to give back.
That's awesome. And you think about the idea of leaning on your primary care physician, that person that you trust, and talking about this, because it's different for every single person. Bernie has found a way to get in that game and help others do the same, and then help folks steer that. But to just accept it, I'm hearing very clearly, that's not the best conversation to have, to talk further, get deeper. You had all those surgeries, all those injuries. That's different than someone just coming in who has not had those and watching that journey take place. So right away, there was some great wisdom to connect with that primary care physician and talk about that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Bernie, perfectly.
Yeah, and get in and see your primary care guy. Get what your baseline is. So when I'm saying, I didn't go, I went to get my baseline to see where I'm at. When you're laying in a coma, that's kind of easy to do that because you're almost forced to.
No options. You're out of options, as they say in ball. Yeah. Let's wrap up our last segment here with you and me, Bernie, and get into the next with perhaps a thought. What might you want employers to be thinking about as they manage their colleagues, their employee bases, their leaders? What would you want them to be thinking about to take care of their players?
Yeah. Being biased as a player, again, as I look over at Kenny, and I joke with the owners of the NFL teams sometimes that the 53 guys on their team are their biggest assets. And it amazes me that they still get cortisone shots, okay, which they gave in the 70s, okay, and to their best assets. To the employers, being able to understand. I know there's a cost equation with this, but just again, some of the things that I said today, if I was a senior VP of one of your companies, and especially if I was senior VP of HR at one of your companies, and I had these type of issues with you, it's becoming a little more socially acceptable to be able to get away, to have these conversations. Whereas 20 years ago to 40 years ago, you couldn't even consider saying these type of statements from a job standpoint, from a job security, from a promotion standpoint. So one, it's kind of the tolerance, the open-mindedness, the compassion to be able to be tolerant for us when we're able to, if we bring this up, to talk about it. Absolutely. I know it's legally, you have to have a pathway within our companies to do this, but there's a pathway of paperwork, and then there's a real pathway of help that you could do. And when you're able to really openly talk about it, have a pathway within the company that's towards success, towards recovery, towards help, towards that physical and mental health and wellness, having a real pathway, and some of the programs that, you know, I know that we've talked about at Altman and AltCare, you know, some of the stuff that the NFL Hall of Fame is trying to do now, more creative ways, just like technology's gotten better, just like medicine and research has gotten better, being open-minded now to incorporating some of the new wellness concepts that are really there. And I've been saying, besides a company, and we're talking about this from a business standpoint, from employers to employees and employer companies, but especially what's happened with this virus over the last 2.5 years. What happened with the election, what happened January 6th, whether you're a D or an R right now, man, we've had the virus, we've had uncertainty, we've had, again, all this, us in this room over the last 30 months, 2.5 years, with this virus, with the stuff going on politically, with what's happening in Ukraine right now. the tension, the anxiety, the people that really just get mad at each other right now, it's really at an all-time high. If there isn't now a calling and a responsibility, say of us as athletes, us as leaders in the community, of bridging that gap between everybody, getting into the inner cities, getting in and out to the schools, getting out to people, showing that we could get along, that it is a time and almost a responsibility of all of us right now, because I didn't want to be the old guy when I was growing up saying, oh, when I was young, it was better like that. But the safety, the compassion, the caring of one another, I really believe us as leaders in our community, as employers here, that we have that responsibility, and it's at a crucial time in our local economy here, but within our country, that's imperative that people like us get out there, spread the word, and genuinely spread the word, not just get out there to be seen.
Yeah, Bernie, talking about good mental health, it's community health. When you can wrap around caring and then connect that to pathways. It can be community pathways, it can be family pathways, it can certainly be an institutional pathway. So I appreciate that, Bernie, and that idea of carrying around it on the national scene, the local scene, and just let's lean into it. Let's lean into it. Speaking of leaning into it, how about a great big round of applause for Bernie as we wrap up?
Thank you, man.
Super, Bernie. Give you a big hug before you get too far along. You bet, pal. You bet. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. Well, Bernie, we could have gone all day, but we also have the second half of the game to play, so we won the first half. No pressure on our team coming out of the locker in the second half. Since we're at the Hall of Fame, we can talk that game. What I think is so cool about bridging Bernie's conversation, you heard about him go through the physical, the pain part of that, and then the development of how do you respond and react. And he spent time taking a normal pathway, but then he realized at some point he had to call time out, and he moved into something that was unique to him and that he had to follow and commit to. Each of us, it's a parallel world. It's a parallel world for us. Knowing what perhaps is not working, calling time out and adjusting, whether it's with our children, with those that we lead out of the HR office, or certainly teammates and friends in our worlds. Understand to be the best teammate, create pathways, and understand that we have to call timeouts. So Bernie, thank you again for letting us get our head around that and making sure that we see it through your eyes. So another round of applause for Bernie. Take good care. Thank you. I can do that for you. Well, now we move to second half, and we're going to connect Bernie's journey and your journey to some great information. We will call it factual information about what's the truth going on baseline with mental health in our local communities, and then two great resources to talk about it through their eyes, what they see in their offices and practices. So what you'll see me do is introduce each one at a time. They'll come up and take their seat, and Dr. Andrew Mader will then assume the podium and direct the next series of our afternoon. So as I do that, you can stay seated until I'm done, and we'll give you a round of applause as you come up to the seat. So our first panelist today is Dr. Edmund Winslow, MD. Dr. Winslow earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Toledo, UT, and completed medical school at the Medical College of Ohio. He completed his family practice residency at the Altman Family Practice Residency Program, where he served as co-chief resident. So we are so cool to have local and grown. He's board certified in family medicine and has maintained a practice in Stark County for the past 30 years. The neat thing about that is 30 years of a commitment to us. He served as medical director of the Alt Care Population Health Management Program and our clinical quality since 2011. He's passionate about the transformation of primary care and promoting quality to drive value. So join me, welcoming Dr. Edward Winslow to one of the seats. Why, I thought he was just going to run and leap right up onto the stage.
I thought about it, but I figured I'd trip.
Good moment. Yeah, I'd have been diving under you. Thank you, Dr. Winslow. Our next panelist, Ruth Scheifler. Ruth works as the clinical health director of the Altman Behavioral Health and Counseling Center. Again, right here, one of our great teammates. She's passionate about counseling individuals, and get this, who struggle with both substance use and mental illness. Understand the combination between the two. There'll be some unique things surface, I'm sure. She also has special interest in treating adults with a history of trauma, and trauma is also an underlying filter in many mental health journeys. Additionally, she's educating others in order to decrease the stigma of mental illness in our community. I love that word, decreasing the stigma. So you join me welcoming Ruth to the podium. Gotcha, girl. And I know if we both fell, I would go down, and Ruth looked like she walked right up there like no trouble. And then Dr. Andrew Mader will join us right here at the podium. You'll see her then move us through the next segment of our program. Dr. Mader is the Chief Integration Officer at Stark County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery, commonly referred to as StarkMAR. And her journey has been really cool. Serves as the lead for the Behavioral Health Access and Integration Collaborative. That integration collaborative is going on around our community. It's going to produce great things for our companies when this is all done. After practicing medicine for almost 20 years, Dr. Mader changed gears to work in community settings, helping to bridge the gaps between healthcare and various other systems. Understand the concept of systems collaborating is our power to get forward on this. And that'll come in our conversation, I'm sure. Formerly, Dr. Mader was the director of the Stark County Help Me Grow program, which is part of the statewide system serving the comprehensive development of needs of children. At the same time, Dr. Mader was the director of Related Service Division, which provides specialized services to students. So you're connecting our student world and family world to the panel as well. So if you can take something away, use this phrase: informed behavioral health care. Informed behavioral health care. If you can wrap your head around this through their conversation, we're going to have a great takeaway. And speaking of a takeaway, this little piece on your tables will be your takeaway that Dr. Mader is guiding us through in the ensuing minutes. So this will be your connection to what you're going to hear in moments. So let's welcome Dr. Mader to the podium. Here's your right clip. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. And I think we need to give Bernie another round of applause because he has set us up. You set the play for us, so now hopefully we can deliver for you. Before we go into the panel discussion, I just want to give you a little bit of an update of what's happening in the community. And Mike referred to that a little bit with respect to the Behavioral Health Access and Integration Collaborative. Mental health access has been a Stark County need since 2012. We know we've been struggling. We continue to struggle with that. But we have systems in our community, our education system, our healthcare system, both physical and behavioral health, trying to address the mental health crisis within their own systems, but also collaborating with each other. In 2019, there was a creation of a behavioral health strategy work group. This work group was created to identify were there still any gaps needed. And they did identify that despite the collaboration, we continue to have siloed efforts. So they felt that we needed a county-wide approach to address access to mental health services. So they supported and they recommended to support and secure local funding to have a county-wide position to coordinate and lead these collaborative efforts. So the Chief Integration Officer position was created, and I assumed that role in August of 2020, prime pandemic. And that position is supported by Altman Health Foundation, the Stark County Educational Service Center, and StarkMAR. The collaborative's current objectives are twofold. The first is to look, and Bernie referred to it and Mike referred to it, we're really looking at how do we integrate care, both physical and behavioral health, so that people can go seek care one-stop shop. Makes it easier for everyone, and it lessens the stigma. The second objective that we're currently working on is we're looking at the social determinants of health and the challenges and barriers that our citizens are encountering tied to those socioeconomic issues that they're struggling, And they're making choices. Do I pay my rent or do I go see the doctor? So we're taking a look at that as a community. The collaborative has an advisory committee, and you can see from this list, it really has representation from the entire county. We have key stakeholders and leaders in the community that sit on the advisory committee. Bernie alluded to this, Mike alluded to this as well. So we know the mind and body are really one functioning entity, but unfortunately, we treat them separately. Physical health and mental health are intimately intertwined to create the mind-body connection. Our mind and body work in a continuous feedback loop. So our brain has brain chemicals that have pathways that connect to the body, which then those chemicals can affect, when there's an imbalance, it can affect our body's organs. So if one is out of kilter, the other is out of kilter, and now our physical health and mental health are at an imbalance. The problem at hand. Pre-pandemic, we knew that there were 1 in 5 adults that were suffering from mental health challenges. 1 in 6 youth were suffering from mental health challenges. But obviously, we're pandemic in almost 3 years now. Anxiety has reached the highest level since the onset of the pandemic, and our depression rate has tripled. Depression is one of the most costliest illnesses to healthcare, not only in the loss of productivity, but healthcare costs in total. And depression affects an employee's ability to complete physical tasks by 20%, and it affects their cognition by 35%. The United States versus other high-income countries. Despite the fact that United States spends more of its GDP on healthcare, we have the worst health outcomes, both physically and mentally. And when I use the word mentally and mental health, it's really incorporating what we are seeing as mental health and substance use. I'm just using it and putting them together. But you can see here, we really don't have that great health outcomes. So we need to address this for ourselves as a nation. When we take a look at communities, you know, the question I'm asked sometimes, because I'm very much of a data person, I'm a science person, so I like numbers. But I'm asked often, do you really know how many people in Stark County are dealing with mental health challenges? And the true answer is no. Because stigma, some people don't seek assistance. People seek assistance from mental health professionals, from primary care, from other types of professionals. There's really no one big database that we can capture all that information. But what we can capture, unfortunately, are deaths that are attributable to overdose and deaths attributable to suicide. Those two indicators really do tell you the intensity of the mental health challenges of a community. So this first slide is showing you an almost 10-year trend of deaths by overdose in Stark County. And you can see that we continue to increase. That is the national trend, so we're not so special, but obviously that's what we need to address locally, is these deaths by overdose. And our partners in this room, our other partners in the community are all working on this. Deaths by suicide, another indicator. For us, you can see in Stark County in 2020, we had a lot lower number, all right? The theory behind that is, obviously 2020 was the onset of the pandemic, and everybody was willing to talk about the stress and the anxiety, our kids, our adults. So we had a sense of community. We're all in this together. But unfortunately, when you take a look at 2021, our statistic goes back up to being high. So again, deaths by suicide and deaths by overdose, indicators of the struggles of our community. There's a resource in Stark County called the Mobile Response Team. The Mobile Response Team is a collection of behavioral health providers that respond in the community to any crisis. And that crisis is defined by the caller who's asking for assistance. So it can be as extreme as, oh my gosh, I'm seeing someone overdosing on the street. It could be as quote unquote as simple as a parent calling and saying, my child doesn't want to go to school and they're being belligerent and I need help. So it's really, again, the caller determines the definition of the crisis. I put this slide to show you that, unfortunately, you can see what 2021 has done for the usage of the mobile response team for both adults and children. Of note, take a look at the top 3 reasons. They're exactly the same. Notice that life stressors is one of the top 3 reasons for calls. Okay? This slide I want to show you, unfortunately, of a potential. So in April of 2021, there was a literature article in our medical journals that was released that showed a correlation of patients, people that were diagnosed with COVID. Not necessarily severely ill, but just diagnosed. And what they found was that 1 in 3 of all of those folks that were diagnosed with COVID had the potential of having mental health challenges within 6 months of the diagnosis. If one of those patients was in a critical care setting, that number went to 1 in 2. So I just want to show you the statistic, and this was from April 14th, the last report that I was able to pull, the numbers for us in Stark County. And you can see at that time we had just under 80,000 cases of COVID, which, let's just take that 1 in 3. That's giving us over 26,000 individuals just in our community who would potentially deal with neuropsychiatric issues in the next 6 months. That number that's almost 3,500, that's interesting because the study also found that of all the people that potentially would deal with these issues, 13% of them had never had any issues before. COVID deaths. We know that for every 1 COVID death, 9 people are grieving. Unfortunately, 10% of that group are going to have prolonged grief that need mental health services. So again, just showing that number, at that point we had just over 1,750 deaths, which leads us to believe another 1,600 individuals are going to need our help for behavioral health services. This is just to show you the cost to an employer for people that have depression in their organization. This is just an example of an agency, an organization that has 100 employees that's in the Midwest. And you can see at the top table is that approximately 10% of individuals in a company of 100 will have depression. And you can see the cost in absenteeism and loss of productivity, and unfortunately, the excess cost, healthcare cost, that's to the employer. The bottom table, however, is half of those 10 are now receiving services. They're receiving treatment for their depression. You can see suddenly there's a decrease in the number of work days that are missed and decrease in the loss of productivity. What's interesting in this slide is that you have a decrease, obviously, in what we call the traditional type of care, which is what most of us see right now. They either go see their primary care physician or they happen to have a mental health professional. If you remember, one of the objectives that the collaborative is working on is really trying to create one-stop shop. Take a look at the significant decrease if people receive health care in a one-stop shop. So this was just to show you, again, how does it affect our employers? This slide, let's take a look. So at the bright blue is the mental, on the x-axis is the mental well-being score. And you can see in the middle, that's the median. When we take a look at the teal bell curve, those are people that are struggling in the workplace who seek no services or don't receive services. And you can see that that bell curve 2/3 of the employees in that scenario are either languishing or significantly struggling, so to the left of the median. But now, let's get assistance to these employees. All of a sudden, now we're at the orange bell curve, and we've shifted to the right. We see 2/3 now, instead of struggling and languishing, they're thriving and super functioning. 1/3 is languishing, and nobody is significantly struggling. So really, that's a win-win for everyone. Okay, so before we start in the framework, I'm just going to have both Dr. Winslow and Ruth introduce themselves a little bit, tell us a little bit about what they do and how they contribute to the mental well-being of our citizens. Dr. Winslow?
Thank you. So my name's Ed Winslow. I'm a family practice doctor. Is this working? I think so. How about that? There we go. My name's Ed Winslow. I'm a family practice doctor here for just under 31 years. And did you ever get asked to do something that you agreed to do, and then you got there and you found yourself overwhelmingly underqualified to do that? That's kind of the situation that I find myself in here. So in complete disclosure, I am not a behavioral health specialist, and I'm on a behavioral health panel. But being what it is, also in complete disclosure, if any of you looked at the advertising for this, you'll find what pretty much is a high school picture of me that was sent out. Either that or I've had the worst 2 weeks you could ever imagine. But it's closer to a high school or actually grade school picture than a current one. And the reason is because I hate to have my picture taken unless I'm standing next to Bernie, which kind of makes you wonder who might not have gotten enough behavioral health support in the past. But anyway, here we find ourselves. And what we realize from a primary care standpoint, and what we need to understand with every patient that we see, is that behavioral health and physical health are intimately connected. You can't get away from it. There's no doubt about why that is, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But if we go back a ways, Socrates said there's no illness of the body apart from the mind. He died in 399 BC. So 2,400 plus years ago, this thought was out there. We're not rediscovering anything new here. We sort of think we are, but 2,400 plus years ago, Socrates, who wasn't a physician, knew that what was going on up here had a profound impact with what was going on in the rest of your body. Then we sort of got real technical, and we had all kind of medical advancements, and we forgot about all that. And then we found out, when we look at these things, when you forget about all that, your performance as a healthcare system is not suboptimal, it's abysmal. And we find ourselves paying for a Rolls Royce and driving a Yugo is what we're doing right now because we're focusing on the wrong things. We think as physicians that we have the answers and that we can fix things. What we find out is that what we do in our office is a very small impact on overall health. Health care has very little impact on someone's health. There are a multitude of things that are more important than that. And if we don't realize that and understand that, we're just spinning our wheels because we're doing a whole lot of stuff for somebody who needs something perhaps entirely different, and we're not supplying that. And the other unfortunate part about that is when we say, talk to your primary care physician about that, the thing I'm going to tell you is most of us have very little, if any, training in this. I mean, a third of my undergrad degree was psychology, and I have very little training in how to approach this. So we rely on the behavioral health specialists to help us deal with these people, because if we don't, we tend to see the outcomes that we're having. And we know that we need to deal with this because depression is the #1 cause of disability in the 15 to 44-year-old age group. So it's more impacting than anything else we deal with. We've already mentioned that 1 in 5 adults are on a psychiatric medication of some sort. Most of those are antidepressants. The other thing that we get concerned about is employee safety. So when we have employees, we want to make sure that they're safe. Workplace stress is the #1 cause of insomnia. And the reason it's felt to be so is because workplace stress decreases your natural release of melatonin, which helps you sleep at night. When you don't sleep at night, you're fatigued the next day. When you're fatigued the next day, you're more likely to get injured, especially if you work in an occupation where you're around machineries and moving parts and things where you might fall off a scaffold or something like that. So we find out that the safety of our workers is intimately tied to stress levels. The other thing that we all worry about is retention. I don't know about of any business that isn't fighting to keep good workers right now. I will tell you, in primary care, we're in a world of hurt because, first of all, there's not a lot of people that want to do primary care. Second of all, there's not a lot of people that want to do primary care and live in Canton, Ohio. So, you know, unless you're from here or unless your spouse is from here, I don't get people saying, well, I was in Colorado, but doggone it, I want to be in Canton. And really what I want to do is do primary care for the next 30 years and stay there. It just doesn't happen very much. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge for most other businesses as well. Look anywhere. You get help wanted signs all over the place. And if there's anything good to be said about that is these people are now getting paid a bit more than what they used to, which kind of helps on multiple fronts. But the bottom line is we have problems finding good quality workers that can do what we need them to do for us to function efficiently. Interestingly, yesterday, I get all these articles every day in my emails, and most of them I ignore. But one of them was from Gallup, and it was a new article that just came out, and it said that only 24% of employees agree with the statement that my employer strongly is concerned about my well-being. So 24% feels their employees really care significantly. What we see as a result of that is decreased retention and increased burnout. But we also know at the same time that if an employee feels that the employer is strongly concerned about their well-being, there's a 69% decrease in them seeking new employment somewhere else. There's a 71% decrease in burnout, and those employees are 5 times more likely to be strong company advocates. So if we communicate to them and let them know, we're on board with this. We understand the role of mental health on physical health, and we're going to work with you. We're going to work with you and make sure that we get you to where you're going to be. You tend to keep those employees around, and they function much better. So we're always concerned about return on investment. From a return on investment standpoint, we've shown that every dollar spent on behavioral health leads to a $4 savings for the company. So at the end of the day, if we address these things, we have safer, happier workers that are more productive that'll actually stay with you. So it's almost to a point where we can't not address this. It's gonna come up one way or another. It can't be buried. It can't be denied. And we're going to pay for those issues whether we call them behavioral health or whether we call them physical problems that are impacted or caused by inadequate behavioral health. And I'll talk about that more later.
Sure. All right, Ruth.
Hi. Wake up. Okay, I'm Ruth. I'm the clinical director at Altman Behavioral Health, and I am a counselor as well. So I get to split my time between doing clinical work and also doing administrative work. And like Dr. Wimslow, I looked at the flyer this weekend and it said experts, Dr. Wimslow and Ruth. And I'm thinking, okay, I know mental health. I love mental health. I don't know that I'll ever be an expert. The more I'm in this, the more clients I see, the more information I have, the more research I do, the less I know. So I'm excited anytime I get to talk to people about mental health and what we can do to support each other and being healthier. I get excited because it's ever growing, it's ever changing. Everybody's different and everybody needs something different. In my role at Altman Behavioral Health, I get to do a lot of communicating with different businesses within Altman Health Foundation, within different businesses in the community, school districts. And a lot of times my role is just answering questions. I'll get an email from a colleague at the hospital that says, hey, I have a friend, I don't know what to do, can you help me? Or I'll get a unit manager who calls me and says, Ruth, I'm really concerned about somebody, what do we do? Or I'll get a call from an HR director at a local business that says, we need to do something to support our employees, what's our next step? And so it's exciting to me to work in the community, to be able to just collaborate with people to talk about behavioral health, talk about how we can support each other, and just work together to get through this. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go round robin, answering questions. And I may interject if, I have a thought, but I'm going to let the experts. I'm going to keep calling you guys the experts. So we'll start off with Ruth. We say the word mental health. Ruth, in your professional opinion, what is mental health?
To me, mental health is that intersection between what I think, what I feel, and what I do. And so every single day we go through our day, and sometimes we're behaving beautifully and everything's going right, but my thoughts are just not healthy. I had this happen a couple weeks ago. I'm going to work, I'm getting everything done, I'm effective at home, but I had this obsessive thought in my head I couldn't get out. And I'm like, what in the world? It was impacting how I felt. It impacted how I went through the day, it impacted those emotions. Just kind of being a little off balance at times with what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. 3 things that really impact our mental health are our environment, our genetics, and our lifestyle. And I don't know about you, but my genetics are not A+. Next week at this time, I'm not going to be 5'9". I'm not going to have blonde hair. And I'm not going to run fast. My genetics are things I can't often overcome. On a behavioral health sense, if you have a family history of anxiety or of struggles with alcohol use, it's good to know what my genetics are. I can adapt to knowing that information. I may not be able to turn that off, but I can make different decisions in my life. And then that gets to the environment. What is it in my environment that's healthy? What is it in my environment that I need to maybe change or adjust? What is it with my lifestyle that I can do differently to be healthier? And I think as employers and as leaders in our community, we also need to be looking at what is our environment that we work in? Are there ways that we can make this environment a healthier place to be? Is it something as simple as lighting or music or being welcomed on Monday morning instead of, walking through the door and everybody's grumbling and, oh, it's Monday? And what can we do to improve our environment so our employees are healthier and they feel welcome and they're happier and the safety factors are increased? So those are the 3 things with mental health: environment, genetics, lifestyle. What do we as employers do to improve or encourage our colleagues to improve their lifestyle choices? Do we have those conversations? Do we encourage pleasant activities on the weekend? Do we encourage people to take a lunch? Do they feel guilty when they're taking a paid vacation? Lifestyle choices are really important for our health.
Okay, thanks. So, she's given us factors for mental health. We hear always physical fitness. How about mental fitness? What is that?
I love mental fitness. Mental fitness goes right back to physical fitness, though, for me. A lot of things that we do for ourselves, that mind-body connection is huge. Getting up and moving. When I was doing some research on the impact of COVID on just everyday life, a lot of what they talked about was movement. People were sedentary. People were working from home. You weren't walking to the bathroom. You weren't walking to talk to the colleagues. You were just sedentary. And it had a huge impact on how we felt mentally and physically. So going back to that mind-body connection, I can't say that enough, how important that is. And in my work with working with individuals with trauma, it's amazing how high stress levels impact us physically. We may not know that we are stressed out until my heart starts to pound a little faster, until, you know, I'm always feeling on edge, or I can't relax, or when I lay down to go to bed at night, my body just wants to keep going. That's that high stress. Part of our mental fitness is the resilience. Do I feel confident in who I am? Do I feel confident that I can manage intense emotions? So I'm talking to my boss yesterday, right as I left from work, and I wasn't nervous at all about being here today until he said, "Ruth, I may stop in tomorrow." No. So at that moment, my gut starts to rumble a little bit, and I'm feeling very nervous and anxious, and I'm sitting there thinking, I can't do this. I think I may have the flu. You know, I'm going to call Mike, and I'm going to step out. Mental fitness is recognizing this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, these are my skills, these are my strengths, and I can do this. That's mental fitness. And if I'm not feeling fit, I may call Mike and say, I have the flu. Dr. Wimslow can carry this. Okay, so part of that is my emotional. Am I emotionally confident that I can handle what I'm feeling? Second part of this is my social network. Do I have support? Do I have support at home? Do I have support at work? Do I have support in the community? Financial is a big part of this. Is how much confidence and how much security do I have in my financial status? I don't have to be rich. But if I'm going to work every day and I'm paying my bills and I worry if the hot water tank blows tomorrow, then I'm done. That impacts my mental fitness. So those things in our lives that we sometimes can control but sometimes can't also impact us. And then the final part of the mental fitness is our physical health. We don't have to be going to the gym every day doing squats and deadlifts and bench presses and, you know, getting my PR every week. But we do have to be cognizant of what we eat and how we move and taking care of ourselves.
Thank you. Dr. Wimslow, why is it important for employers to support their employees' mental health and mental fitness?
So I want to talk a little bit about just a little bit of biochemistry, and not very much. But the way our brain communicates with our body is with various hormones and neurotransmitters. And there's two different ways that it can do that. We have a couple different ways things go. One is a stress response. Stress response, you release things like cortisol and ACTH and epinephrine. The other way is a relaxation response. So we see opposite functioning hormones released, like norepinephrine and serotonin and natural pain controllers like endorphins. So both of these are good. The stress response is a very good thing short term in certain circumstances. So if you're being chased by a lion, you want to have the stress response because it's pumping extra blood to your muscles, it's making you more mentally alert, your blood pressure goes up, you're able to perform a little bit better. But when you have that response day after day after day after day after day, it messes things up physically big time. Because what we see is in the relaxation response, that's when your body is doing things like cancer surveillance. We probably all get cancer 50 times a day. Our body detects it, it gets rid of those cells, we go on and we do fine until that doesn't work. Or immunity. There's been lots of studies that show that stressed people get sick more. I will tell you, when I first started working and we were on call in the hospital, I would get sick every time before I went on call. It would be upper respiratory stuff, nothing big, but I would say to my wife, I'm getting congested, I got a sore throat again, and she'd go, of course you do. you're going on call. And she was absolutely right. It would happen every time. And that's part of the reaction to the stress response. We don't fight infection as well. If you give a stressed person an immunization, their antibody levels are significantly lower than if they're relaxed. When we get into things like chronic diseases, the most common ones, diabetes, coronary artery disease, cancer, chronic pain, all of those are influenced by where we're at along the continuum of stress response versus relaxation response. What we see is that depression activates the stress response. So your forebrain knows that you're depressed, it knows you're not going to get eaten by a lion, but your hindbrain doesn't know the difference. It interprets all of this the same way. And as this goes on repeatedly, it takes its toll physically. And the ultimate final worst case of this is there's a concept in Japan called karoshi. Karoshi means death by overwork. So what they see is in people that you don't expect to have an issue, you can see sudden cardiovascular or cerebrovascular death. And when they look at it and look at the lifestyle that they've had, it's long hours of work, not taking time away, not having days off. That pattern actually was shown to happen more in the United States than it does in Japan. Well, Japan's got a word for it. We have it happening here, just that on those death certificates, nobody writes overwork. You know, you write something else, but the reason that that happened was because of the lifestyle of the person going up or leading up to that. So we need to be acutely aware of these things. We need to know how they all interact, and then we need to do everything we can to stop that progression and try to keep people more in a state of healing, relaxation, than a stressed, a lion is chasing me, primed for action state, because all of the other health things that go on depend upon that state of relaxation to fix stuff. And if stuff doesn't get fixed, they come in to see me, and then I try to deal with the effects of inadequate behavioral health or non-existent behavioral health. It's just that in a medical office, it's a whole lot easier for me to deal with that than to say, how are you feeling today, and do you feel like you're stressed, and did you maybe not have enough affection from your mother when you were growing up? You know, there's so many other things that go in there. The reality is, though, I've got number one, I'm not trained to do that. Number two, I got 15 minutes. Number three, even if I do take the time to at least ask the question, to get somebody in to see a behavioralist is rather difficult, and it takes some time to do that. In a crisis, we can, but in the, yes, this has been going on for the last 40 years, we need to start addressing it, and you need a long-term conversation with somebody. That takes a bit of time to make that happen. So if any of you out there have children that are looking for direction in life, please steer them into behavioral health of any sort, because I guarantee they will have employment forever and they can live wherever they want to, because everybody needs more of this.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, in just a few minutes, we're actually going to give you guys some strategies on how to address just what he said, that stress, that work, issues, the like the need for overproductivity, etc. But let's ask Ruth, since we are using the term stress, all right? So what is the difference between stress and burnout? Because right now, people are using them interchangeably at an alarming rate.
Well, to piggyback off of what Dr. Winslow just said, stress is that natural reaction that our body has to help us survive. We want that reaction. That's a really good reaction for us to have. Burnout is when I've been operating in that system for too long. And a lot of times I don't even know that I'm operating there until I don't have to be there anymore. And then I can't bring it down. And we saw this a lot with the hospital employees through COVID. We kept checking in with different managers and different units saying, how are you doing? What can we do to support you? How can we help? We're good. Everybody felt good. Well, when the first wave of the pandemic kind of eased and things were a little less stressful in the hospital, that's when everything fell apart. That's when all the nurses were saying, wait, something is wrong. I don't feel right. And so they were kind of being able to balance life a little bit more, but they felt awful Because here they are trying to go home and spend some time with their families, and they could not physically relax. They could not physically be in the moment. They were in burnout, if not at that point in post-traumatic stress. Because just too long a period of time working too hard in high-intensity situations, our bodies are not designed to perform like that. So a lot of times, we're in the moment and things are going well. I see this a lot of times with people after they retire. Their career is great, they're very successful, everything feels good, they retire, and then bam, they don't feel good. They're like, physically, what is going on here? And that's that prolonged stress that has led to burnout. And so being aware of that, helping each other be aware of that is important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as a colleague or an employer. How can I be aware of other people around me and be like, I'm a little concerned about what I'm seeing or how you're functioning right now.
Dr. Winslow, you alluded to this, but obviously the lack of mental health and the chronic stress foretell other costly physical ailments. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Unfortunately, a lot of times, what I see in my office is, as I said, a result of unattained or inadequate behavioral health. So if we look at most of the problems that we deal with, it's estimated 60 to 70% of primary care visits are because of a condition that's either caused by inadequate behavioral health or made worse by inadequate behavioral health. So by not dealing with that side of it, really we put ourselves at a significant disadvantage. It's a disadvantage to the patients because we're not getting to the underlying problem. We have to realize where somebody is coming from in terms of their issues before we can address them. It's a disadvantage to the system because we spend a whole lot of money trying to fix things the wrong way. We're doing one thing when the problem is over here, and we're treating the after effects, and by not addressing what happens here, it's very inefficient, it's very costly, and we tend to see results that show that we're not doing the right thing for patients.
Okay, thank you. And Ruth, what are the most common barriers for folks to accessing services?
Before I get to that, I'm going to piggyback off of you again. I have a lot of clients that I'm seeing right now that have come to me as a last resort. They've been to their cardiologist, they've been to the ED several times, they have an endocrinologist, they have a massotherapist, they have a chiropractor, they have all of these different specialists because every part of their body feels off and they're looking for the answer. And sometimes then they'll come to us, maybe someone in the emergency room said, okay, you need to go see someone in behavioral health. And so we'll start working and they don't believe that it has anything to do with stress. But as all these different specialists then have checked off the boxes and everything is just fine, it goes down to stress. And I had a client come in last week. It was interesting. He really didn't want to see me. Nice guy. Really didn't want to see me, but came in because he trusted his specialists. And he got the very last specialist to say, this is not your heart, this is stress. And so he laughed. He asked me for like 10 business cards on the way out of my office, and he said, I'm going to take these to my specialist because they've been talking to me about how they can help other people who are going through the same thing. So once again, let's get to the foundation of this and not have that moving target that may not even be impacting my health at all. So some of the barriers.
I always tell people when you've got so many problems going on that I can't begin to explain why you've got all these problems, we need to look somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And if you can get them to accept that, because sometimes they won't. Sometimes they're invested in, I've got a lot of medical problems, this is out of my control, there's nothing I can do about it. It's much more difficult to get somebody to realize that they can significantly impact all of this other stuff themselves and not come to me for the answer. But when you got 8 different body systems that seem to be decompensating all at once, mm-hmm. it's stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the barriers that I hear from people in the community, first of all, is access. People really don't know where to start. Who do I call? And oftentimes I'll encourage people to talk to their primary care doctor. Other times people don't have a primary care doctor, and so they end up in the emergency room, or they don't end up anywhere. And so all of a sudden they're calling the mobile crisis response team. So a lot of people, it's very confusing to know where do I start to get treatment. So having those conversations with your colleagues and the people that you work with is important. Do you have one person maybe that you can contact who knows where to start, just to get that ball rolling? Another challenge is finding the right person. So many times you'll see one counselor or one psychiatrist and you don't like them. It's okay not to go back. It's okay to encourage them to see somebody else. It has to be somebody that you feel comfortable with and that you can work with and you can be honest with. Because if you can't do that, then you're not going to get anywhere. And I often tell my clients, if you don't like me, that's okay. I'll help you find somebody else, because it's that important for your treatment. Wait times are huge. A lot of times people will call in for an appointment and it could be 3 to 4 weeks before seeing someone. If I'm in a crisis scenario, that's not good. So we do the best we can to get people in, but it's really challenging right now with staffing and with availability. And then some of the other barriers that we can think about within our companies is those financial barriers. Can someone not make it into treatment because they don't have daycare? They can't bring their 6-year-old in to talk to a therapist when mom is talking about trauma. That's not appropriate, not healthy. Are there other financial barriers to paying a copay? Are there other financial barriers with transportation? Sometimes people just can't make it. The car breaks down, don't have money for gas. All of those things impact someone getting treatment.
So we've kind of set the stage. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this framework. And like Mike said, you guys have a copy of this framework. And now we're going to give you actually ideas for the 5 standards, that things that you can do within the context of your organization. And a lot of these ideas will be no cost or low cost to you, but the gains or the return on investment will be significant. So we're just going to go with, like I said, the 5 standards, and start each standard with how can an employer, so the first one is make mental health a priority. Dr. Winslow, what should they do?
I think, again, the first part is realizing the importance of making mental health a priority. The other thing is to make sure that, from a coverage standpoint, you're giving mental health equal access as physical health. You know, I don't know if these are around much anymore, but it used to be I would see patients that say, well, I've got 10 mental health visits that I can get in within a year. Well, we don't say you've got 10 visits to get your blood pressure under control, or I'm going to give you 10 visits to get your diabetes under control, or any of the other physical ailments that we see as a result of mental health issues. So we can't limit that. We've got to make sure that they've got equal access to mental health, because I'm going to see them anyway. They're going to come in and see me anyway for the other problems that weren't addressed. Mm-hmm. So making that a priority, I think, is a big part of it, and plan design is part of that. The other part then is making sure that the employees realize and understand what's there and know how to use it. Mm-hmm. The same article I saw yesterday said that 30% of employees don't realize what benefits they have available. They don't know how to access them. Mm-hmm. So one of the suggestions they had was to auto-enroll employees. So take an employee, say, everybody's in this program. Here's what your appointment time is. You can go talk to them. If there's no needs identified, you don't have to come back anymore. But if there are needs that are there, we've already got you in the system. We already have the ball rolling, and we can continue to go from there.
Okay. So really taking a look at changing the climate in the workplace. You know, adjusting policies, adjusting protocols, maybe changing how you guys do performance reviews. Instead of a gotcha, it's more of a, you know, we see you're struggling. You know, what else can we do here? So go from that frame of reference of it's about you first, again, with those struggles. You may want to create a wellness team within the organization. Have a leader, a champion that employees can go to. All right, Ruth. So enhancing mental health supports, what else can they do?
I think holistically looking again at what helps people with their mental fitness. Does your company offer support with a gym membership? Do you encourage people to have positive social supports? Do you talk about nutrition? Are there ways that someone can access massage therapy? It's probably not covered by insurance, but is that something that as a company we can support? Just even having conversations about it's important to take care of ourselves. It's okay to take care of ourselves. Knowing your employee assistance programs, that's huge. When I think of EAP programs, I always think of behavioral health because you get 6 free visits. You know, that's what we think of. But if you look at employee health programs, a lot of times there's a lot more support in there financially, with transportation, with other health options. It's not just about behavioral health. It's about the whole person. So knowing what those options are and being able to communicate that to our colleagues.
Okay. Well, speaking of communication, Dr. Winslow, how should they communicate to their employees?
In as many ways as possible, and repeatedly. You know, over and over again. You can do it in person, you can do it at meetings, you can blast out things to their emails. Anything people are looking at, use that avenue and use it over and over and over again, because the first 9 times you do it, people might not pay much attention to it. But if the 10th time matters, that's where you need to go. You know, I always think of it in what I do. I've got people that year after year after year after year after year refused a flu shot. And I ask them every year, anyway, even though I know that they say no time after time. Not uncommonly, eventually, they say yes. And I say, we've been talking about this for years, and you've refused over and over again. What's different this time? And they may say, well, I figured it must be important enough that you keep bringing it up that I finally agreed to do it. Well, it's the same thing with this. If we can, you know, not only we kind of say the employers aren't realizing mental health is important enough, the employees don't realize that either. And so we've got to make both sides of that equation realize the impact that this has, so that eventually we can get around to being able to effectively make an impact. But if either side of that does not, then nothing happens.
Okay. And then, you know, we've heard we want to make the workplace inclusive. We want to make it comfortable for people. So Ruth, any ideas on how they can create that culture?
A lot of what we've done at Altman has been to just spend time in conversations and educating different leaders and different managers so they know what to do and they know how to communicate to their staff. So they know what tools are available. And I have to laugh when Dr. Winslow said, send it out. You know, you may have to do this over and over. Sometimes I feel like we inundate our Altman employees with information about behavioral health resources. But I can honestly say there is not a week that goes by that another colleague will come in for treatment and say, I never knew you guys existed. I'm like, we send flyers out all the time, we're in emails all the time, we have all this information going out, but it's not always being seen. People are busy, you know? They don't always read every single line on their email. So I think the consistent communication, but I think that also then goes back to the leadership in the organization and the management, and knowing your employees, and just saying, hey, there are these resources. Or I've noticed you've been absent a lot lately, I'm concerned about you, what's going on? And then having that conversation. You know, you're valuable as an employee. I'm a little concerned because I notice you haven't been as social lately, or you haven't been eating in the lunchroom, or, you know, all of those things that we notice changes in behaviors, but we don't always say something. Another thing we've done at Altman is doing a lot of education where a counselor will go out to a certain unit and teach relaxation skills. We'll teach skills on meditation. We'll teach skills on distress tolerance to bring down that part of our body that is always on overdrive. So being able to reach out and get some really good hands-on support for colleagues is important as well. I've had other businesses in the community who have called us to be able to do that in their businesses. So a counselor will go out and do a little workshop on distress tolerance. So that's been a neat way to also just kind of open the lines of communication. But a funny story, I was walking through the hospital, this was a couple months ago, and I ran into a nurse who was a client of mine. And I don't always know how to handle that, you know? So I smile and I make eye contact. She comes over with 3 colleagues and she's like, "Hey, this is Ruth, she's my therapist." Here I'm sitting there thinking, she's gonna be embarrassed, she's not gonna say a word to them. She wasn't. She was proud of the work that she was doing and that she was feeling better. So some of that stigma, I think with all of these conversations and with this education is softening. And I think that's very important.
So you know the phrase, "you matter"? Well, we all matter, and how do we matter is if we communicate with each other. So going to the last standard, you know, we want to know the changes that employers are doing in their organization. How do we measure? How do we hold employers accountable? Because the employers are going to want to hold. So any thoughts? Last thoughts, Dr. Winslow?
Guess we could look at how busy my schedule is. Certainly there are things that you can do internally. You can survey and talk to your employees and say, getting back to the, are you strongly invested in our overall well-being? Do the employees feel that that's what's going on? Ask the employees if there are needs that they feel they want to have met that you're perhaps not providing. Get feedback from them on a regular basis and make sure that you kind of do that serially because things can change. Yeah, I've seen a lot of programs that start and they seem like great programs and then a year later they're not there anymore. So you got to kind of keep your fingers on the pulse of that, and if you identify a need, make sure that as much as you can, you do something to address that.
Okay. All right. Well, we hope that the information that we shared will help your organization begin its journey in adopting a culture of mental health and mental wellness. And taking the first step towards change is always the hardest. But the fact that you guys are here today, pat yourselves on the back because you did walk your first step. So I'll turn it back over to Mike and Denny, and thank you very much.
Mike, come on up here. Mike, I'm going to give you first chance to say thank you to the panelists and the program and the attendees.
I sure will. Thanks, Dan. Just very quickly, how about a huge round of applause for the expertise, but the heart and soul that was behind that expertise today. Thank you all very much. Great job. Great job. Now just get out of the way. You captured Bernie, who took us through the life journey, and now it connected to your personal journey. You got a lot that you can do with this. And what we heard today was powerful stuff because it connects to your company, it connects to your family, it connects to your ball team, it connects to your locker room. And what we do with it is really cool if we put these two stories together. So as I get out of the way and give it back to Denny, that framework and your great heart and soul is going to be how we win this. Thanks, everybody.
Well, as we prepare to depart, I said in the beginning that I thought this was going to be an excellent program. I think that we lived up to that. And we do a lot of these events, as you know. I can honestly say I think this was one of the best that I can remember. And for this purpose, first of all, we have experts with us in the community that keep us healthy every day. We have a healthcare system in the community that keeps us healthy every day. We have someone like Bernie who, takes a lot of courage to sit up here, to stand up here, to go out into the community and say, I'm not perfect. I had to struggle. I'm not perfect. Because that touches a lot of hearts. And I think, the information, the advocacy of mental health has to come from everyone. I'm proud as a chamber to partner with our board and AltCare And we offer a Canton Regional Chamber health plan. It's for small businesses. If you are a small business owner or an employee, between 1 and 49 employees, these plans are designed to bring health care to you, quality health care through a variety of different policies. And part of that is mental health. And so we feel that that's important. If you don't have access to mental health, if you don't have access to good health care, how do you take care of yourself? So from a standpoint of business growth, business retention, it's important to the Chamber that we put that program together. I want to say thank you to AltCare and Altman Health Foundation for partnering with us. For each of our panelists and for Bernie, I know you can't wait to get another football. But we do have a collector's item of memento that we have put forth this past year at the Gold Jacket enshrinement ceremonies. So it's just a little memento to say thank you to each of you for today. And Bernie, if I was in better shape, I'd have you go along and...
I throw them, you have to run.
That's right, that's right.
That's why this is not happening. So thank you so much to everyone. Please talk to your employers. Please talk to your employees about mental health and make a difference. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.